Ever find yourself looking at all the different beliefs in the world and just wondering, how do you find what's actually true? It's a huge question. Well, today we're going to unpack one author's very specific framework for tackling it, all based on an article by S.M. Yunus. And really, it's a question that gets right to the heart of things, doesn't it? I mean, with thousands of religions out there, they can't all be true, especially when they contradict each other. The author of this article starts right there, asking, so where on earth do you even begin? Okay, so the author's whole premise starts with a simple idea. Truth is singular. You can't have a bunch of contradictory beliefs all being true at the same time. And according to this article, the biggest roadblock to finding that one truth isn't out there somewhere, it's inside us. It's our personal biases, our emotions, the way we were raised. So we even start a real search, you've got to be willing to kind of set all that aside for a moment.
All right, so here's the game plan for how we'll walk through the author's argument. First, we'll look at the mindset needed for this quest. Then, we'll get into this really specific 5-point test they propose. After that, we'll see how that test applies to monotheism and Holy Scriptures. And finally, we'll get to the author's big conclusion. So the very first step in this framework isn't actually about comparing religions at all. It's about looking in the mirror. The author argues that you have to start by using what they call your God-given intelligence, basically your reason. And you have to be free from prejudice and all that cultural baggage to even have a shot at making a clear, rational decision. And that brings us to the real heart of the article's argument. The author lays out this framework that's almost like an investigative toolkit. It's a 5-point test, a set of questions designed to systematically check out any religion's claim to be the true one. And here they are, the 5 main criteria of this test. The religion must be purely monotheistic. Its scripture has to be from a divine source. It needs to be chosen by God. It has to be universal. And finally, it must be completely free from idolatry. According to the author, a religion has to check every single one of these boxes to qualify as the true one. Okay, let's dive into the first one, which the author sees as the most important test of all, the concept of God. The framework isn't just looking for monotheism, it's looking for pure monotheism. And as we'll see, that has a very, very specific meaning here. And that specific meaning is a concept called tawhid. In Islamic monotheism, as the article describes it, this is the absolute, indivisible oneness of God. What does that mean? It means God is one single being, with no partners, no kids, no equals, nothing. And he is the only one who deserves to be worshipped. That's the benchmark. Now, this is where the author starts to apply that benchmark, and it's a really key distinction. The argument in the article is that while we often call all 3 of these religions monotheistic, only Islam's concept of tawhid fits the purely monotheistic test. Why? Well, from the author's perspective, the Christian Trinity is seen as dividing God's oneness into 3 beings. And for Judaism, the author points to a passage in the Quran that mentions a claim about Ezra being a son of God, which is also seen as associating a partner with God. So in this specific framework, both are considered to fail that very first test. And to really hammer home this definition of pure monotheism, the author points directly to this verse from the Quran. It's presented as the clearest, most definitive statement on God's nature in Islam. He is one, completely self-sufficient, and absolutely unique, with nothing like him. Okay, let's move on to the second criterion, which builds right on top of the first. The author argues it's not enough to have the right idea about God. The religion's holy book also has to pass its own rigorous test. And here are the specific conditions the author lays out for a scripture. First, it has to have a divine origin, revealed to a specific prophet. Second, it can't have any mistakes or contradictions. Third, and this is a big one, it must be preserved exactly as it was originally revealed. And finally, there has to be real, authentic evidence of its origin, when and where it came from. So here's the author's argument on this point. They claim that while the original revelations given to prophets like Moses and Jesus were, in fact, divine, the books we have today, like the Torah and the Gospel, are not those exact original texts. The article, citing the Quran, claims that these scriptures were changed by people over the centuries. And this is where the author says the Quran is completely different. They highlight this verse, which makes a pretty unique claim right inside its own pages, that God himself promises to be its guardian, to protect it from being changed or corrupted. And to support that claim, the author points to over 1,400 years of history. The argument is that the Quran has stayed exactly the same for all that time, and the proof they offer is twofold: historical manuscripts and this incredible, unbroken tradition of millions of people memorizing the entire book, word for word, generation after generation. All right, so now we get to the final stretch. Let's see how the author pulls all 5 of these criteria together to reach a final verdict. So, the framework quickly runs through the last 3 tests. For chosen by God, the author points to a verse in the Quran that says God himself chose the name Islam for the religion. For universality, the argument is simple. Its message is meant for everyone, everywhere, for all time, not just one group of people. And for no idolatry, the author states that Islam strictly forbids worshiping anything that is created, which is a central pillar of the faith. And boom, this table really just lays the whole argument out in one clear picture. It shows how, when you run the major religions through this specific 5-point filter, the author concludes that only Islam gets a yes on every single point. So, you see, the author's conclusion isn't presented as just a feeling or a belief they were raised with. The whole point is that it's framed as the logical outcome of applying this rational 5-step investigative process. According to this article, the framework itself leads directly to this one answer. And that wraps up our look at this particular framework. It's a very clear, systematic way of looking at a massive question. And, regardless of what you think of the author's conclusion, it does leave us with a pretty interesting thought. When we face these huge, ultimate questions in life, what kind of framework should we use to find our own answers?